It's great to meet you.
This is my colleague, Kristen Bell.
Hi, Kristen.
And
Hi.
she has a PhD in philosophy. We're so excited to talk to you about your book, which we have right here.
Aha, yeah. Look at that.
It's such an honor to be able to talk with you about it.
Yeah, I'm excited.
In the most general terms, I thought this book was about work and governance. And so what would you say is the point of work?
Lincoln has a great way of putting it. He says, our creator gave every person one head and two hands. And by that creation, he probably intended that head should direct this pair of hands, right? Right. I mean, it's an image of not being under the authority of other people, but being under your own authority. One of the things I want to do is to help us understand where we are today by understanding where we came from and our political thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So what I argue is Americans in particular have a hard time talking about power, domination, and subordination at work because we've inherited a mode of discourse from the 17th and 18th centuries that talks all about free markets, free contract.
Mm-hmm.
And that focus is something that we inherited from people like Tom Paine and Abraham Lincoln. But they were speaking in a context that doesn't exist anymore. It wasn't crazy for people to think before the Industrial Revolution that a regime of totally free markets and free labor, in which you would abolish all forms of involuntary servitude, not just slavery, but Adam Smith, for instance, railed against unpaid apprenticeships. We still have those today, right? Our college students, right, have to endure those things.
Right.
They could use a little Adam Smith to back themselves up. He didn't think actually that joint stock corporations, what we call public corporations today, were efficient. He thought that there was no way to hold the executives to account.
Can you tell us how you came to realize that the workplace is kind of like a dictatorship?
Again, it's a kind of a fiction of our free market discourse. And sometimes economists speak like this because they haven't really looked at the legal infrastructure of markets. They imagine that the employment contract is the product of a meeting of the minds.
Yeah.
Like the employer and the employee get together and they negotiate the terms and conditions of labor.
Right.
Negotiation, yes, it is true that if you are, a star basketball player or even a star academic, you can start negotiating the terms and conditions of your employment. But the vast, vast majority of workers, there's no negotiation that happens.
Yeah.
Somebody applies for, an ordinary job in manufacturing or a slaughterhouse or warehouse work or retail. The most they'll be told is the wage and when to show up.
Yeah.
They're not negotiating over like what the work conditions are going to be like.
Right. Yeah.
It's take it or leave it.
In your view, like, what's dystopian about our current, I guess, work system?
Slaughterhouse workers in many slaughterhouses in the United States are told they can't use the bathroom for their entire shift.
Yeah.
If they need to go, they got to wear diapers. Imagine just the indignity and humiliation of that, not to mention the unsanitary conditions. These are people who are preparing our food. 40% of entry-level workers have no reliability over their work schedule. They're scheduled for random hours throughout the day. There's no stability at all. It's not just the paucity of hours. It's the fact that they're changing from day to day. What this means is it creates chaos in people's lives. How do you arrange stable childcare arrangements?
Mm-hmm.
So their lives, they can't plan for anything. And then maybe if they're a restaurant worker right in the middle of the day between lunch and dinner, they're let off.
Yeah.
So they can't be making wages during that time, but it's junk time on their hands because their friends and family are at work and school.
In your view, how has law contributed to the situation we're in now?
One of the critical defects, I think, of free market ideology is that it represents markets as spontaneously evolving. Now, in fact, markets can often work really, really well. But when they work really well, it's virtually always the product of an elaborate legal infrastructure. What is the content of the employment contract then? It's basically laid out, the default contract is laid out by the state. And that's why employees don't even know the terms of the contract, because it's laid out by the law. And what the law says is employment at will. Now, in fact, most American workers have no idea that they could be fired for no reason at all.
I know.
Indeed, what you find is they are fired for no reason or for some insanely stupid or unjust reason. And then maybe if they're angry enough, they'll call up a lawyer because they were unjustly fired. And the lawyer has to tell them, well, were you fired because of your race or your gender? You know, there's a few categories where you're not allowed to fire somebody. And most workers who've been treated unjustly can't say that it's due to discrimination. And then they're like steaming. Well, why didn't they know that in the first place? They didn't know that in the first place because that the terms of discharge were never negotiated. It's not a product of the meeting of the minds. It's a product of the background infrastructure of employment law.
But people who have sufficient autonomy in their work that they can develop a sense of agency and self that isn't alienated when they go to work. How do we make that larger in our society? What do we do to start bringing that about?
Well, that's a really deep question, and I can't say that I actually tackle it in private government.
Right, that's why I want an answer now. It's been a little while. I'm sure you've figured it out.
So basically, what I'm doing in private government is I'm tackling one aspect of the problem, which is domination and subordination. It's the fact that workers are under the thumb of their bosses, have very little recourse against that. How could we change that situation? And there I'm arguing for a change in the constitution of workplace government. So we see this already proposed by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's argued for the adoption of German-style co-determination for America's largest corporations. I think that's a good start.
Can you explain what that is?
It establishes that the management of the firm shall be joint between the workers and representatives of the capital investors. So you have workers on the board of directors, but I think more importantly for the day-to-day experience of work, in the firm, you also have works councils. So they deal with the actual conditions of work on the shop floor. You know, what is the pace of production? Is there pollution, you know, in the plant that the workers have to breathe in? Is the lighting adequate? Workers have an official say. So that Warren's trying to bring a system like that, at least into America's largest firms.